I look at our industry and I think, we get in our own way. We have to stop being so closed off and thinking we can do everything ourselves better than anybody else.
This is the Insurance Technology Podcast, where we bring interesting people from across the insurance ecosystem to discuss and debate technology's impact on the industry. Join us each episode for insights and best practices from industry stewards and tomorrow's innovators. Now, here's your host, Reid Holzworth.
Welcome to the Insurance Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Reid Holzworth. In this episode, I'm interviewing Pete Teresi. A lot of you guys that have been in the industry for quite some time know Pete. I've known Pete for quite some time and consider him a good friend. Pete's done a lot for the industry. Not only is the founder and CEO of Certificial, which is solving real problems in the industry when it comes to certificates. He also was at ACORD for quite some time, which he became CEO of the one and the only ACORD Solutions Group, ASG, which a lot of conversation around that. Stay tuned. We're going to get into all that stuff. Really great episode. Pete, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me, Reid.
So, Pete, let's start kind of in the beginning. How did you get into insurance or insurance technology? I feel like, it's funny that all of us say in the industry, how did you fall into this world, right?
Yeah, right.
It's fairly rare that people just, wake up one day and like, I wanted to be a forest ranger when I was a kid. I didn't want to be in insurance, right? Like, so tell me, how'd you get into this world?
Yeah, well, it's not your traditional way, right? So I actually, I started my career in technology. And so I was, working for, outside the insurance industry for a number of years, right? I was working for Microsoft, so I was kind of in the big tech companies, found myself working in the financial district in New York City for a number of years, working for some startup and some tech companies there. I learned of an opportunity that was in the insurance space for ACORD. And it was really to come in, again, wearing that technology hat, So when I got introduced to insurance, I still came into the industry really looking at it from a technology perspective. But it wasn't long before I really got introduced, to the day-to-day and started seeing, how organizations were operating, that I realized what a tremendous opportunity to start to combine, technology and really starting to learn the insurance space. So, I was, with the ACORD organization for a number of years, as you know, and it was really during that time that I'd say that I started really almost like getting more involved in the actual business of insurance, not just looking at it from a technical perspective and day-to-day operations and, how best to create standards and produce them, but really looking at it from a practice perspective, a workflow, how are we actually utilizing these standards? And, and that's where I started really seeing some great opportunities, quite honestly.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think when I met you obviously had ACORD. You had ACORD for a lot of years.
Yeah.
I guess it's fair to say you were at ACORD fairly earlier in your career, though, overall.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, indeed.
And you did a lot of things. You wore a lot of hats throughout the ACORD organization. Are you like ACE certified? Do you wake up and read like standards and like do you go to bed reading that stuff or
no,
what?
I think all my certifications are expired at this point.
So there it is. Yeah. So I think there's there's a few number of people in the world that are still ACE certified.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Good for them.
I commend
Write
them
your ticket. I swear. No, that's awesome. So,
to answer, I would like to build upon that, right? I mean, I did wear so many hats there, right? So it was like forms was one of the first departments that I ended up actually getting involved in, which started transitioning me into the business. And so, that kind of opened up a lot of, interesting opportunities in itself, just the word forms, right? Yeah. What that means to a technologist, like looking at the utilization. But no, I would later, be responsible for standards globally. And, I think last you and I met when I was still with the organization. I was the CEO of the ACORD Solutions Group, which was really formed, as a result of trying to modernize, right? Trying to move towards solutioning and move away from documents, right? Because even the main assets coming out of ACORD are documents, right? Whether it be in an implementation guide or a form, they're documents, right? And so, it's all about building solutions and trying to put, an actual product in somebody's hand rather than a project. So yeah, that's kind of how I always looked at it.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm CEO of Ivans.
Yeah.
Ivans and ACORD were formed at the same time, same founding members.
That history there.
They say that the industry formed it, mainly carriers, came together and formed nonprofit. They said, hey, we need standards and we need connectivity. Standards would be what is now known as ACORD, and it's always been ACORD, and then connectivity, now known as Ivans. And it's interesting. It's interesting how that's kind of evolved, like you said. And so industry. It was interesting that it really was. It became a lot about the forms themselves, and a lot of people don't realize, because newer people in our industry are dealing with the the PDFs, right? But these were actual paper forms that were consumed, and that was a standard, right? And these are apps. And last I checked, I mean, you would probably know this. I mean, when I was working with forms within my TCAMS days back in the day, I mean, there was probably 1,400 forms or something. It was a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. The library is very extensive.
Very extensive. And I feel like the forums didn't start going digital until probably 6-7 years ago, maybe. They were, but like really took off digital, right?
Right.
I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I would probably say that's an accurate time frame. And it's just amazing when we consider digital. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, we were no longer printing and mailing, and it is now being emailed as a PDF or submitted in some other type of fashion, right? But it's we like to stretch these words and use them in glorified ways.
So at ACORD, did that, CEO, ASG, and then you're like, you know what? I'm gonna go and do something on my own, right?
Yeah, well, you know what it is? It was a little more of like a natural progression, quite honestly, because if you think about it, right, when I mentioned I got involved, the very first part of the business was forms. And then so as I took that, journey you just described, one of the things that I've done throughout, all the years is listen to the members, right? Listen to the agents, listen to the brokers, listen to the carriers, what are the challenges they're having inside their organizations? And, although there may be, 700 or even 1,200 forms inside the library, there's one that's always stood out to me. And that would be the certificate of insurance. And the reason it stood out was because it didn't matter how small or how large the member or the organization was I was speaking with. This was a real operational challenge. And so I'll take that and I'll couple it with, the real push that we've seen probably over the last decade. But I think to your point, your time frame you gave of 5 or 6 years is where we've actually been seeing impact and results of modernization, the need to actually move forward. I think we've actually been seeing some real change in the industry as of the last, 5-6 years, even though there's been a drive and to start it over a decade ago. But with all that being said, I thought, and I looked at this and said, this is something that if we want to see ourselves as an industry that's evolving, what's the one place where insurance intersects with almost every other business and every other vertical? Mm-hmm. And interesting enough, you're back to that same form, the certificate of insurance. It is where we intersect with every business that's out there. Right. And it's not, some of the stuff is pretty self-contained, right? If you're writing a new policy or you're throwing a claim through, it's as complex as it is and as much that goes into it, and as much as there's a need for technology, when it really comes to how the rest of the industries and the rest of the businesses see us as moving towards, modern type of approaches, data-driven, less documents. What a great place to modernize. And not only is it also one of the places where we're having some of the biggest operational challenges inside the organization. So when I thought about the next journey in my career, I said, I want to solve that problem.
Dude, it's a huge problem, man. We all know it. It's a huge problem. And to your point, it's not even the industry that affects so much. It does affect the industry in so many ways, but it touches so many businesses and the way they operate and everything, look at contractors, subcontractors, right? To general contractors. They don't get paid if that cert's not on file and it's not up to date.
Exactly.
You go to collect your check on a Friday to as a subcontractor to go pay all your guys, and guess what? That GC says, "Yeah, sorry, cert's not up to date, dude. Go call your agent."
Yep.
You know, and then they're on the phone at 5:30 p.m. trying to get somebody to get that so they can get that money to pay their people. Like, this is a real problem.
No, right? and I love that you actually come at it from the policyholder's perspective, because I often say, and I clearly can't do this in this discussion, that we forget about how impacted the policyholder is, because we're looking at it through the insurance producer, right, who's got tremendous day-to-day operational challenges, and then we're often looking at it as the certificate holder who's just trying to collect and gather all these documents. But too often do we forget how affected the actual policyholder is for all the reasons you just noted.
Dude, trucking companies, like all this stuff, it's a monster, right? It's so much efficiency for business in general can be gained by solving this problem that you frankly set out to solve. And that's where you founded Certificial. A lot of listeners should know the company. That's yours. That's your baby, right? And it's there to help fix this in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
So talk about that. How do we make this better? How do we make this better?
I mean, when I looked at this, again, looking at the workflows, I mean, what I saw from an operational challenge, I mean, if you know it as well as anybody else, if you're going to support, any decent sized commercial business inside your organization, COIs are going to be a part of your day-to-day operations and life.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And with those, we're not talking about a cost of business that's like a percentage of commission here. We're talking about you're going to need FTEs, technology, right? It's
bodies, dude.
Operation, right?
I mean, and for the listeners, people don't realize, Resource Pro, Patra, like all these guys have made huge businesses out of manually doing this stuff, like literally. And to help, it's help. Yeah, bodies, people. And absolutely. I mean, and technology, but technology, I could argue, hasn't really been there.
No,
and that's what you're trying to solve.
That's exactly what we're doing, right? And so, you highlighted the insured perfectly, but just to touch on a certificate holder for a minute, right? Who is the recipient of a document, right? Maybe it's a digital PDF, but it's a document, and the fact that it's in an electronic form isn't really much better than that paper form, because of the fact that it still does one thing and only one thing. And that is, it provides a snapshot of insurance, which means it's at best 24 hours worth of information for a policy that, we're going to monitor, usually in most cases, unless we're doing a delivery for, the better half of a year, right? In most cases. So I mention all of that because, when you're creating technology and when you're thinking about solving a problem, you got to really understand how deep is this issue, and what portion of it do we really need to focus on? And I think that's one of the things that we did at Certificial that was probably one of the biggest kind of differentiators, is we don't look at this and say, I want to solve this for the insurance producer. All right. I'm not looking at this wearing a cert holder hat or a compliance management hat, and I'm not forgetting about that policy holder who sits in the middle of that process and quite honestly might be more affected than anybody in the end, depending. Yep. But so what that says to me is that this process is flawed if no stakeholder involved in it is being serviced properly today, and everybody has a challenge. Then this is not something that we should change or we should modernize. It's a must. We have to. There's no reason why we still are operating and working this way, especially given all that obvious pain that's going into this, all these stakeholders. So what we did was we really looked at this entire workflow from beginning to end and said, we're going to create technology and we're going to come up with solutions, because we know our industry that work and support the business as it exists today, because of the size of this, because of how much it's ingrained in business. You cannot just come in and flip a switch. It's never going to happen. So now you have to build technology that can support today without hindering the ability to really move forward and be, and modernize and actually be innovative. And that, again, that's simple to say. It's actually very difficult to achieve in technology, because as soon as you support today, it usually hinders your forward thinking capabilities. And I'm happy to say that we were able to achieve this where, in production today, we have solved this problem. At the same point, you can adopt our technology and still support those who are living in that, legacy mode and want to stay there, or how just don't even realize that there's another way of conducting business. It doesn't affect that. You can still utilize Certificial for all that. But most importantly is that we've seen the end result, right? Which is the more modernized way of this approach. And we can dive into what that looks like and, of course, how we achieve that.
So look, I think it's genius. The total addressable market of what you're going after is massive, like big numbers. And the operational efficiency across all the stakeholders that you're talking about, there's real money that can be retained ROI-wise from these organizations by leveraging technology to solve this. Right. It's a real thing. It's funny though, I've had, you and I have even talked about this in the past, but for the audience, don't you think at some point, as guys like yourself that are solving this problem, now I have a technology solution that's giving me the data that I need as the consumer of that data. Don't you think at some point that becomes basically the system of record and the source of truth for me? And it's not so much about the quote unquote form anymore, right? Maybe the form powers it still. Don't get me wrong there.
Of course.
But does that specific form start to be not as valuable, and it's more about the connectivity to the systems and everything that power it, right? Yeah. Your system.
And I have an opinion on that, right? And so, let's not forget what the form was created to do. The form is a standard. It is intended to standardize the information and render it, quite honestly, in a consistent way. And it still does that in Certificial. If I look at it as we are almost allowing it to live on, right? Because we haven't eliminated, like when you work in legacy mode and when you work in the most modernized way possible in this transaction, the form is there. The difference is that we've created a network that enables smart COIs, dynamic COIs, not static data. We are not transmitting documents. We're transmitting data. In Certificial, It is a data-first experience, and the form is nothing more than a rendering of that information and a display of that information in a printable format representative of the policy at any given moment. Not the moment I decided to email it to you or stick it in the mailbox. The moment that as it looks right now, it from that record of source, that actual policy where it exists today. When I look at my COI and when I look at a COI on Certificial, that's what I see. I see the document and it matches the policy information at that moment, not the last time it was generated, not the last time it was produced, because it's nothing more than rendering the information directly from the system of record, which is really I like to say, a proper positioning of the form. It should be at the very tail end of the process, not in the middle as conducting the transmission of the information. Right? Because as soon as you do that, you insert a document anywhere in this workflow, you break the workflow and you reduce it to point in time information only. And that's why you have to position the form at the very tail end of the process in order to really solve this issue.
Well, it's funny. I was going to call you out on this because you're a smart dude. You used a word earlier in this conversation, and you said snapshot is what you said. A snapshot of the information.
Right.
You're right. It's about real-time connectivity, right? Proving that this is real. And it's interesting as soon as you bring a document into this thing, it's like, wait a second. All right. Is that real? It's like I have documents in my truck right now that are 2 years old, right? Like, what are those? I get it, the date on them or whatever. It doesn't matter. And look, the other thing too about all of this, there's a lot of fraud people don't realize.
No, and that's another interesting point. So, most, it's interesting. I work with a lot of agents, and, their traditional practice before coming and adopting our technology is a lot of them are sending the COI to the insured. And then the insured is actually handling the last, mile of delivery there to the actual certificate holder. I'm sorry, as a certificate holder, I don't think that the insured should be providing a document, because then we also open up the exact issue you just mentioned a moment ago. who actually created that document, right?
Yeah.
Am I certifying myself?
Right. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Do I tell you, hey, Reid, I went to Harvard. Here's my degree, or do you want it from Harvard, right? Like, the idea is let's allow the organizations that actually know whether I'm insured evidence my insurance directly. And granted, that's just, it just goes from just the process and how it's been over the last 40 years. Again, can't continue to do things just as we've always done it that way, right? At some point, we got to realize as we change this and as we go more electronic, creating a relationship, a three-way relationship, which we do between, an insurance producer, a policy holder, and a certificate holder, and having those three work in a very transparent way is really, going to bring everybody value here. It's not just about getting data and getting continuous data to the certificate holders and making their lives easier. How about the fact that once you create a relationship with a cert holder in Certificial, you never need to worry about sending out another cert again because they're dynamic, right? Like you'll never need to worry about sending a cancellation notice again because it's automatic.
That's right.
It's this is what happens when you have a direct relationship with that and you make that digital connection all the way to that cert holder versus just communicating with your client. And, and again, only seeing that process to where you think it ends for you, which is at your client. You got to remember that you want to better serve your client. Remember that journey has one more leg to it, which is to go to their client, right? I.e. the cert holder, and look at this holistically from end to end instead of just what do I need to do my part.
And it's funny because the three parties that you mentioned, all of them want this. And that's what's so interesting about it. Everybody wants this to be solved. I mean, like, who wouldn't? Like somebody that's lying about the coverages they have or something, or it's a fraudulent action. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, and so, everybody wants this. Now, it's a tricky thing. So you do have some competitors, and I'll use that loosely, competitors, because the market is so big. There's so much going on there. People are kind of going after it in different ways, right? And they're all of them are solving problems in certain ways. It's funny. I feel like other companies that are focusing on this space, they've all kind of tried to go after the broker side, and they look at that, the agent side. How can I give this solution or sell this? My go to market is through agencies. That'll be my distribution. That seems to fall flat. Like, agents are like, nah, I'm good, right? And they're like, well, maybe look, but Mr. Agent, it could provide real value for your customers, the big, call it a general contractor or whatever it may be.
Yep.
And the reality is that typically producers have a hard time cross-selling insurance.
Yeah, right.
Well, cross-selling or having this other solution to add to their bag of things they could sell. It just doesn't really work. So some are going after, the big employers, right? Mm-hmm. And big, Fortune 500s, which, it seems like you're taking that route. You've got some, through different ways. You've taken down some big freaking logos. I'm not going to name names, but you have. Interesting, and it's again beneficial for everybody in the chain. So I don't talk about that, like different go to markets and kind of how people are looking at this, and by no means am I saying compare yourself to the others or whatever.
No.
There's not like a lot of people that are really doing this at your level. There's a handful at the most, a few we'll call it, right? But I don't know. Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
So,
go to market.
Yeah, I think for us, it wasn't. Do you do one of those things? Do you focus on this segment? Do you focus on that segment? Again, we wanted to say, well, we need to look at this and say we want to focus on everybody, because if you're going to solve this problem, you have to service all three of those stakeholders. If you look at any one of those stakeholders and say my client is this person, then as far as I'm concerned, you're missing out. Right. So I look at an insurance agent and broker as much of my client and my customer as I do a cert holder, as much as I do a policy holder. But now that doesn't mean that all three of them pay. right? That's a different
right. Well, that's
strategic-
I mean, he was going to pay for it, right? Yeah.
right? So there's a business model, right, that you also need to be strategic with. But whether you pay or not, you're a customer here. If you're involved in a stakeholder, if you're one of those key stakeholders, you're unique. You're a customer to Certificial. That's how we look at it. Now, we are solving this problem from the insurance industry out. Is how we're looking at this. Okay. If I were look, if certificate holders could solve this problem, they've done it already, right? They are the recipient of the information. They are not the producer of the information. So it's very difficult to solve this from a cert holder side. This really does modernization, innovation for this particular really needs to come from within the insurance industry. If you're doing modernization at a cert holder, if you're doing innovation at a cert holder level, really what you're doing is you're being innovative in saying, I have figured out a really cool way of using fancy technology to do the same old thing. So maybe I don't have people or typing and doing data entry, and now I've got technology and AI, but you haven't really transformed the process, right? You've just made a broken process more efficient, but it's still broken. And that's why you can't fix it from that side. This has got to come from within. And so we look first and foremost is how do we help insurance agents and producers literally be able to share data from that? That's exactly what you and I were talking about before, to the certificate holder. Because when you fix that, you automatically solve the problem for the cert holder. They no longer need to scrape data off a form, right? Yeah. They have access to the data that was used to create that form. They don't need to scrape it off the form anymore. You have to solve from within. And so now the way we do that in our approach is when I left ACORD, I never took my industry hat off, right? Mm-hmm. So, we talked about that earlier too. My business model is we offer, I would say, probably the most complex side of our application is what we give away to insurance producers, which is, our enterprise cert issuance application. It is the extension to your system of a record that allows you to create a data connection with all your cert holders. And because to me, I look at that as somewhat of a standard in itself, right? Or it can be, right? If we can standardize the way, not only are we displaying this information, but we're distributing it, and not by mail or email being the standard, but by a data actual driven experience, then we will really, really impact this. And there's like I said, there's a lot of benefits for the agent, because one of the things we haven't touched on, which I know as well as anybody else, is the E&O risk that comes with every COI that gets issued out, right? And so we want to reduce that. We want to be able to almost eliminate that throughout this process as well. So, operational efficiency and really reducing the risk for our industry that comes with producing these point-in-time documents and allowing organizations to utilize them in a workforce for 12 months at a time or more. That's a problem for us. Like, we shouldn't even allow that anymore in such a highly regulated industry.
Yeah, it's craziness that they do.
Yeah.
If you were to kind of step back, and I'll preface this, that a little bit of a loaded question.
It's okay.
What's the biggest problem in your space? What's the issue that you have? Like, day in and day out, what is the real problem here? I know the answer to this, but for the audience, the answer. I think I know how you answer.
I think you may be a little shocked because I think it's like a two-part, for me, right? At the deepest you can go into the weeds, challenges I see is, and we have a whole project and initiative around this, right? Is helping to continuously educate agents, brokers on the importance of data in their system and how it's being stored and how you're utilizing that. You have got to have clean data, right?
Why?
Yeah, because there's a ton of insurtechs and there's a ton you can do with. Well, why, right? I mean, if in this day and age, if we don't realize that data is our most important asset in our businesses, it doesn't matter whether it's mine or an agent's, right? You have to realize that. And in order to capitalize on that data, in order to be able to utilize, in order to bring real operational efficiency to your organizations, you've got to take that very, very, carefully. You have to have the practices that support that day in and day out. So that to me is, is one of the things that, in our industry, right, that it's difficult. People move around the systems, are doing migrations, things get,
Oh, yeah.
Right. It's a challenge.
The migration point's a good one.
It's a real challenge. And trust me, I'm not saying this is like it's an easy task for any organization to take on. Maintaining, good data is a challenge for anybody. Outside of that, I think it's really our industry needs to break down its walls. And we need to realize that we're not all competitors and that we're better off being partners. And we really take that approach to Certificial. I'll tell you right now that this process that we're talking about today, it doesn't begin with Certificial and it doesn't end with Certificial. There are systems and there are technologies and really great solutions on either side of us. And we're servicing a portion of this role in this process. And I don't look at myself as having the only competitors I have are the ones that think differently about the willingness and ability to partnership.
Yep.
Right. I look at our industry and I think, we get in our own way. We have to stop being so closed off and thinking we can do everything ourselves better than anybody else. Partnerships is one of the most important things that we need to adopt as technology organizations and solution providers if we really want to help move our industry forward. If we can't get past that, the silos and the isolation and the inoperability and all the other challenges, that exist beyond that are just going to hinder our abilities to really be effective.
I couldn't agree more. And the data cleanliness of the systems that are connected and all of it, and just the flow of data and the connectivity is so important. And to your point, the partnerships and everybody around and everybody kind of marching towards the innovating our industry and solving these real problems. Notice we're not talking blockchain and AI and all this other buzzwordy stuff. These are real problems that our insureds, cert holders, everybody, agencies, carriers, right, deal with day in and day out. And it's a monumental thing to fix and to solve. And I really applaud you because I know the other ones that are out there in the industry trying to do what you do. And I know you're talking to them and you're like, and this is no bullshit. Everybody's listening. You're like, hey, how can we work together?
Absolutely.
And you are, and you really have taken that approach. And so it's no BS. You're not, selling the audience here.
Right.
I'll say that because I know it. I hear it. People have told me that. And so no, it's cool, man. It's really cool that, you're not stepping away from you're finishing what you started, if you will. And have been working on for so many years. Yep. I mean, I remember you talking about, moving the standard forward and just all the cool stuff you're doing, working on. And this is a big one, dude. This is a big, big problem, but you're solving it. I mean, you're taking down some big logos. You're making some big moves. You're crushing it.
No, I appreciate that. We've got some real big projects in motion. And when I've seen some of this stuff, in practice, in being used day in and day out, it's that's what fuels, all of us here at Certificial, right? It's like we see that and we see that impact and how that affects businesses and their ability to make educated decisions daily. Not that they're not making educated decisions now, but doing so, they've got more information and they're just making better decisions, right? With that information, they're not looking at stuff and saying, well, the system says this, but it's 7 months old, so I'm going to go with it. They're able to make more informed decisions. Is probably the better way of phrasing that, right? In their day-to-day activities, which is really what's protecting all the interest of all these, all the parties involved.
So, question.
Yeah.
What do you think? So a lot of things are moving. A lot of technology is advancing within our industry. I feel like, and I've said this in the last number of episodes, so it's going to be a little bit of a broken record, but things are really happening, right? I feel like we're starting to see things come together. But what do you think is going to be the biggest impact this next year, 2022, and then maybe 23 and beyond? Just a couple thoughts there,
I mean, honestly, I really think it comes back to, what we were talking about a moment ago. It's we have to be able to really work and integrate systems and be able to just have that partnership mentality. I think that's more important than any of the technology that's going to get introduced over the next 2 years. I really do. You can come out, you mentioned blockchain and AI and all this stuff. Technology is not what solves the actual problem, right? It's the tool.
Yeah.
right? A hammer is a tool, right? It doesn't actually build anything, and tech is the same way, and so, as a technologist, I see a lot of great technology, but is it ever going to make it into our industry? Is it ever going to actually get utilized in a way that is impactful? Because using AI to scrape data off of a form is not impactful to me. I'm not impressed by that. Right. You know what I mean? Using technology to really transform a process is what excites me. That's what interests me. That's true innovation and modernization. And again, the tech that's out there, right? I can sit here and rattle off a bunch of things, but the point is it's our ability to leverage, utilize that, adopt it, and do so throughout an ecosystem. And so, what we look at, we even call ourselves a network at Certificial because of the fact that we are completely API driven on both sides of our application. Right. And so, Certificial is a bit, of a smart COI network, if you will. And it's all about those connections, those relationships, and empowering everybody else who's got all these great solutions to utilize the technology that then connects that stuff, right? So, all the APIs, all the technology that's coming out that's allowing us to communicate. Again, I think we just got to get out of our own way and allow for that technology to actually have some real value in our industry and solve some real problems.
It's an awesome answer, man. Nobody's answered it in that way in the past.
Cool.
I would agree. It's not about the technology itself. It's us all partnering together and working together. There's a lot of cool stuff out there, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, why have we seen so many great ideas not come to fruition? Why have we seen so much great technology get spoken about for 6 months, 12 months as it's the next great thing, and then fizzle away and we don't hear about it anymore, right? Is that technology flawed, or was the process and way in which you were attempting to leverage it, or just the industry's ability to, to actually work cohesively that really caused that to fail? All right. Because most solutions fail, not because of the underlying technology, but because of the strategic nature in which it was attempted to be implemented.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. So look, this has been super good. Cool, so man. Question.
Yeah.
In your opinion, who else should I interview on this show, if you will?
Yeah, I'm sure you got a long list of organizations that you can, that there's so much excitement going on. It's like there's companies left and right. It's hard to really, of recent, I've had some real interesting conversations with like Glovebox. Have you spoken to those guys recently?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have they been on the show?
No.
No. So, that might be someone to take a look at, Ryan Matheson has been sharing with us some of kind of what their organization has done and kind of where they're headed. And they've got a nice little, they got a pretty cool story to tell, and looks like an interesting journey ahead. Might be something your audience might.
When they're definitely making moves, they're doing a lot. Yeah. So that's a good one. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. So many, right? So
yeah.
It's great to see that we've got so much cool technology, being created, and again, it's even more exciting when you see the success that comes along with it.
So let's talk about you a little bit, Pete. So as long as I've known you for quite a while, and you've always been like this good-looking single dude living in the city, like tearing it up or whatever. But that's all changed. Now you're like a family man, good, like different Pete these days. But outside of that, like, what do you do for fun? What are you doing for fun these days?
I mean, I probably have too many hobbies, right? It keeps me from spending time with the family and the loved ones. Sometimes, it's almost like seen as a negative, but it's important, right? If you're gonna do the grind day in and day out, you got to have your hobbies, and you got to give yourself that, that stress relief moment. So, I'm me, I've always been a big fitness nut. So, I spend a lot of time just getting on the road, cycling, just, getting away. And I'll tell you right now, I'll tie everything back to, startups and technology. My partner, Rob, will share this with you. How many conversations this poor guy had to listen to, me breathing heavy because I'm running, but that's when the ideas come. You know what I mean? Step away from the computer, because not only is this stuff good for you, just good for your life and good for your health, but it's I got to tell you, some of the best ideas happen when you're just kind of out there and just allowing your mind to just step away from that machine. So there's so much value to it. So I've always been a big, believer in fitness and in importance of it, and just our day to day. But the real fun comes probably, I guess my two biggest hobbies now is I love getting on the motorcycle and taking those rides.
Oh yeah,
that's wonderful. You can't get much more enjoyable than that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. So what's your favorite drink, Pete?
Are we keeping it to adult beverages here? Or are we talking about day to day?
Yeah, I would assume. I mean, hey, unless it's like smoothies.
Yeah, well, no. I mean, you see me during this whole interview. I've got my Poland Spring here, right? So I'm a big water junkie. I drink a crazy amount of water all throughout the day. But I know it's Friday, and I know the day is over. The week's coming to an end. When I get my first martini. So.
Oh, nice. In vodka, dirty.
I'm a vodka guy.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Martinis, yeah.
Well, hey, Pete, this has been awesome, man, as usual.
Likewise. I appreciate
thanks for joining the show. Yeah, people are going to get a lot out of this, man, and keep doing what you do and keep crushing it, man. You're doing good things as usual. So thanks again, dude. Glad to have you.
Opportunity. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was awesome. I love interviewing people like Pete. I mean, look, Pete's a good friend. I've known Pete for a lot of years, but he's been in this industry, in the weeds, in the technical, working for ACORD. And it was just really awesome hearing his story as he transitioned through the ACORD organization. And then, boom, went and started Certificial to solve these even bigger problems that the industry has. Awesome stuff. Stay tuned.